Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to the Wednesday video, where instead of a bat rep, we take a look at news, happenings, topics, or just whatever the heck comes across my desk for the Wednesday video. So thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be looking at an article that I came across earlier last year that I just haven't had a chance to get around to until today. But given the recent happenings and releasings in the world of Warhammer 40k, I thought it might be germane to talk about it now. So let's take a look at this article and see what we got. So as you can see here, the article comes from Gizmodo from their books and comics section, which at first might throw folks off a bit because normally I talk about a lot of models and games on this channel, but you'll see how this ties in just a moment. So the title of the article is Games Workshop Has Finally Learned Its Lesson. And this is why it caught my attention, because as soon as I saw that headline, my initial reaction was, no, it didn't. But the article is by James Whitbrook, and as you can see, it was published in early December of 2025. So I've been sitting on it for a little over a month, but I finally have some time to take a look at this thing. So let's see what the brief blurb is. It says, after months of silence, the Warhammer 40k creator has decided on a new way to sell its fancy books without them immediately scalped by resellers. So for those of you who may not be familiar with, in addition to all of the models that GW sells, they also have a very, very robust inventory of novels and books and anthologies. I mean, if you never read anything but just their stuff, it would take you years and years to get through it all. And a lot of it's really good. I'm not going to say it's not, especially the Horus Heresy series, which is what this talks about. And one of the big problems is that because GW works on the FOMO model, when they release stuff, quite often it's limited run, and you get the problem with scalpers. So let's see what they got to say here. So starting off, he says, for years now, Games Workshop has struggled with how to get some of its fanciest collectibles in the hands of its actual fans, only for disaster to strike as resellers snap them up the moment they go on pre-order. We're not for once talking about the company's vast array of Warhammer models, but instead its novels. And the struggle to let fans get copies without a ton of frustration and stress might finally be on the way. Well, even though they say we're not talking about models, they're talking about books, it's the same problem. Quite often, Games Workshop releases models, starter boxes, collections, army sets, dice, all kinds of things that are available limited time while stocks last. And the point is the same, to drive people to buy it, whether or not they're entirely sure they want it, because you're not going to have a chance to buy it later, right? It's creating fake scarcity. But let's see what else they say about this book here. So this past summer, Games Workshop was forced to cancel pre-orders for the limited edition variant of a new entry in its long-running beloved Horus Heresy novel series, End of Ruin, when its website servers immediately buckled under demand. But not just from fans eager to get this supposed final chapter of a saga that, at that point, had been over 60 books in the making, but because bots had managed to bypass the company's usual safeguards and hoover up copies. Games Workshop pulled down its entire website for several hours before issuing an apology that it would cancel its plans to release End of Ruin until it could find a way to get the books into the hands of the Horus Heresy readers rather than eBay reseller listings. Okay, so there's some interesting stuff to mention in here. So at first it talks about the Horus Heresy novel series, and when it talks about Beloved, I'm not kidding. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I read the 60 core books and a couple of the outside peripheral ones. I started reading that series before my son was born. He's almost 20 now, so I've literally been churning through that series for 2 decades. And when I finally read the last book in the series, there was this moment where I thought, well, what the heck am I supposed to read now? For the last 20 years, I always had a book to read as I worked through the series. So it is definitely a beloved series. If you haven't read it and you like 40K, even though it's set in the world of 30K, you'll enjoy it. And if you're just a general sci-fi fan, give it a shot, because there's nothing better than getting into a series that you can dive into and thoroughly enjoy. Like anyone who jumped into pick your favorite novel series. If it's a trilogy, you got 3 books. Imagine finding a great series that's got 60 books to work through. Okay, so definitely beloved. But they bring up this interesting problem that whenever they released a new book, yeah, they would release first the hardback and then later a paperback, but they would release a limited edition of these beautiful leather-bound collector's editions. And those, they only made a limited number of them, and they would get sucked up by scalpers, who would then turn around and, of course, as scalpers do, sell it for way higher. So it's very interesting that it says that it got so bad for this last one, End of Ruin, that Games Workshop had to shut down the website, and then it would find a way to get the books into the hands of readers. Here's a crazy idea. Sell them to everyone who wants them. Enough of this FOMO crap. All you're doing is pissing off customers and driving them away. I mean, what a novel idea. Could you imagine if McDonald's opened every day and they said, we're only making 50 burgers today. The first 50 customers get them. Everybody else, you can have chicken nuggets or something, or, pound pavement. It shocks me that Games Workshop had to probably have some kind of meeting around the conference table and say, well, how do we make sure that the people who want to buy this can have it? I don't know, make one for each of them? What a novel freaking idea. But this is how Games Workshop functions. You make something awesome, and you make it hard to get. Nintendo has done this. For those of you who remember how hard it was to get a Wii, when the very first Wii first came out, they intentionally only released a few at a time so that there was this constant lineup to get them. I think it's a terrible way to do business, although it's actually a brilliant way to do business, because if you look, both Nintendo and Games Workshop are making money hand over fist. But from a consumer standpoint, you are being manipulated and abused as a consumer. So what's crazy is the solution to the problem is staring them in the face. They just don't like it, because they would rather keep you on the hook. So let's continue on. Enough of my rant for a little bit. Okay. So it says, this was far from the first time that the Horus Heresy novel series in particular had faced this issue. Yeah, everything they do faces this issue. This is GW's business model. Anyways, the final 10-book saga of the prequel series, Siege of Terra, depicting the invasion of humanity, blah, 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 attracted much attention, not just for its status as the last chapter of a story in the works since 2006, but for the fact that each entry debuted a exclusively, though very limited, leather-bound physical edition designed to look like a tome taken out of the Warhammer universe itself. Yeah, they were absolutely beautiful, stunning. The only reason I didn't get one is because they were really freaking expensive, and I thought, I'm definitely going to read the book, but the $10 paperback is going to have the same story as this expensive copy, and yeah, it would be cool to point to a shelf and have all these nice leather-bound editions for Siege of Terra, but that's a lot of money to spend just to stare at it. For some folks, it's worth it. As a collector of other things, I get that. Just for me, that had no interest. But still, that's the problem. They want to release a special leather-bound physical edition that's very, very exclusive. But here's the catch. You don't need to do a limited run, because not many people are going to want to spend a couple $100 on a book. The price itself will keep it exclusive. You can have your cake and eat it too. Before we even get to what the article's probably going to suggest about how they fixed it, I'm telling you what the solution is. You release the hardback, then 6 months later you release the paperback, or a year later release the paperback, and you release not a limited edition, but just say there is a collector's edition, and it's going to be super duper expensive, and whoever wants to pay that will make it for you. I don't understand the logic in saying we're only going to make, say, 500 of these, and when they're gone, when they could sell 600 of them, 700 of them. It just doesn't make any sense. But I'm not the CEO of a company. I didn't get a business degree. Maybe there's just something I don't get. But it seems to me the best way to run a business is to give the customers what they want rather than tease them with it. So, continuing on, every time a book was released, the Games Workshop website would crumble, the editions would sell out in minutes at most, and guaranteed orders would find themselves appearing for resale on resale sites for well beyond the prices Games Workshop asked for in the first place, which, folks, by in and of itself, that's impressive. If you can raise prices even above what they do, well done. Despite that, the company would just do it all over again with the next release, no matter how increasingly frustrated fans got as they raced to complete their collections. And there you have it in black and white. How many times has Games Workshop run into this problem? Dozens. Have they ever done anything about it? No. Why? Because to them, it signals success. If they do this limited edition run and it totally sells out and people are screaming, but I didn't get one, all Games Workshop hears is cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. They know they've got you on the hook. It's what they do for their models, their books, everything. It's the FOMO business model, and it's part of the reason I step back. Because Games Workshop does this, and then just a year or so later, all the stuff you bought's obsolete, or it's shifted over into Warhammer Legends for models, or something. It's just, they've created this thing that is constantly getting you chomping at the bit to buy something which is going to be unplayable in just a short amount of time. So I think this statement is very telling. They know it's happening, but they would do it again. They don't care. That is, until the End of Ruin's attempted release. Okay, so what was different about this one? Although the company had previously made great pains in recent years to update its web store with methods to try and stem the tide of visitors on high-traffic pre-order release days, which, why? If you can sell 1,000, sell 1,000. The move to completely shut the site down and scrap the book's release for several months was still extreme. Indeed, the last thing any company wants is to have to shut down their website. But now, 6 months later, Games Workshop has come back from the purity seal-laden table with a plan. Admittedly, it's a pretty obvious plan. Today, Games Workshop announced the End of Ruin will go up for pre-order on December 13th. A little late for folks. But if instead of, well, a little late if you're just hearing about it now. But instead of being a traditional pre-order, the book would be what the company refers to as a guaranteed stock run. Any order placed for the limited edition between December 13th and December 24th is guaranteed to receive a copy, with End of Ruin's final total run being based on demand. Again, what a shocking... He even says here, it seems pretty obvious. Make one for everybody who wants one. Someone with an MBA explained to me why this is just so lost on these massive companies. Someone with an MBA explained the business side. Someone with a psych degree explained the psych side. Why do they do this to us? It must work. It must. In my case, it drove me away, so Games Workshop doesn't get much of my money anymore. But for others, it must work the opposite, and they just funnel cash towards it. It must. Someone explained it to me. I don't get it. Games Workshop does this all the time for model releases, especially when it revives classic models from yesteryear as limited-time chances for players to secure out-of-print kits. But it doesn't do this kind of thing for its novels regularly. And it seemingly might be the plan going forward. I guarantee you it's not. Something happened with End of Ruin that made them finally listen. All right, if there were 12 books in the Siege of Terra and all of them screwed screwed readers over by only selling so many and most of them went to scalpers, there's something we're not being told here. Something happened with End of Ruin that was either financially bad or it looked bad for the company. Something finally made them decide, okay, this time we're going to do it differently. If they say they're going to do it going forward, they might. I just doubt it. GW is not that kind of company. So that might be the plan going forward. Siege of Terra's successor novel series, The Scouring, a new range of books that kicked off this month, was heralded with its own series of limited edition books that contain no run numbers and will eventually be reprinted. Okay, well, when they say that, do they mean everyone can get a limited edition? Or do they just mean everyone can eventually get the book? Because that's not the problem. The Siege of Terra, the Horus Heresy, they've got trade paperbacks for days. It's whoever wants to get that collector's edition. The whole point of being a collector is you're willing to do what others won't. And that doesn't mean hammer away at your mouse to try and refresh the page. Typically, a collector is one who's willing to spend more money on something than someone else. I mean, look at how many people see how much we spend on tabletop wargaming, and they go, what are you guys doing? Well, we're collectors. I like to buy the models just to build, paint, and stare at them in my display case. The games are great, but I'm quite happy just to look at them and appreciate how cool they look, appreciate the time I put into it. That's what makes me a collector of tabletop minis. I'm willing to pay that price. Other people aren't. You can separate your collectors from your non-collectors just by the price. I don't know how many of you listening are willing to pay $150 to $200 for a book. But if you are, that makes you a collector. So again, I don't get what the problem is. Some fans who enjoyed the thrill of the chase may groan that making a limited edition was, well, less limited, and it robs them of some of their magic. If you are one of those players who loves the quote-unquote thrill of the chase, I'd be curious your take on this. Does it really bother you that if you want something, there's a chance you can't get it? I mean, this isn't like the championship game in high school sports where there can be just one winner. This is talking about producing a book. I don't know. Is there something to it? I have one and you don't? Maybe there is. It could be lost on me, but that just seems a really lame thing to try and hold over someone. My internet was faster and I'm willing to spend a ton of money. I don't get it. But for the most part, actually letting these books get into the hands of people who want to read them instead of just turning around quick profits in the aftermarket can only be a good thing. Well, that I absolutely agree with. What I just don't understand is why doesn't Games Workshop make that its permanent business model? Just sell the stuff people want. Don't mess with people's psyche, emotions, and brains by constantly teasing this with the FOMO. And if you don't get it now, you might get it a year later, maybe 10 years, maybe never, who knows. But this constantly keeping us unsure of if we'll have a chance to buy it again. That, personally, I think that's a bit unethical. I know some of you might disagree with that, and that's totally fine. That's the point of these. I'm just giving my 2 bits. You're welcome in the comments to leave your 2 bits. So when we go back to the top here, has it learned its lesson? No, absolutely not. GW will continue to do this. The question I want to know is, what changed with Edge of Ruin? Why were they willing to suddenly make this difference? Why didn't they do it on previous books? Why aren't they going to permanently say, you know what, if you want our stuff and you want to give us money, we'll do it? That just seems like a reasonable thing to do. But apparently that's not it. And then the other thing that I mentioned before, we're going to go back to this really quick. The company would just do it all over no matter how increasingly frustrated fans got. We've heard this before. GW does stuff fans don't like. They don't care, folks. Let's do a counter story. For those of you in the United States who are familiar with the recent hubbub with the restaurant chain Cracker Barrel, their company announced a sweeping change to the way that the stores were going to look and the logo and all this stuff. And there was a huge backlash by customers that said they hated it. And they would boycott the restaurant. They would never eat there again. Like, it was big. And to its credit, Cracker Barrel, at the loss of millions of dollars, scrapped the entire rebranding and went back to the way things were. See, people liked going there because there was an atmosphere to it. It's Southern comfort food. And what the rebranding was going to do is turn it into your basic, sterile, ugly, uniform corporate chain restaurant. And customers said, we don't like that. And they listened and they backed off. Customers have been telling GW that they don't like some of their business practices for a long time. And all GW says is, that's nice, here's the next FOMO. Case in point, look at the release of the Custodes. Was it a year ago? Must have been a year and a half ago, because I did a video about it on the channel when they first suggested that there were going to be female custodians. There was a backlash. Some people liked it. A lot of people didn't like it. Some people were kind of indifferent, but they're going, why? Players didn't ask for it. Nobody was saying, do you know what we need? We need female custodians. But GW threw it out there. And it created a huge controversy. Most of the people I know said either I hate it or I don't care, but I don't see the point. I did meet a few who were like, yeah, it's okay. But for the most part, it was either indifference or hostility towards it. So just like the Cracker Barrel example, they made a change. The fans said, we don't want it. But whereas Cracker Barrel rolled back the change, GW just gave all the fans the finger and said, oh, you don't want it? Well, now we're definitely going to do it. And sure enough, in their re-releases, their New Year preview, whatever the heck it was called, they have now revealed their female and very androgynous custodians. So when this article asks, have they learned their lesson? Absolutely not. There's either something we don't know about that happened here, which is why they decided to do this, as many books printed as people are willing to buy for this one book, or Occasionally, GW throws out a bone like this to make the fans think that GW actually gives a crap what they think. That's my 2 bits on it. But I've just seen too many times. How often have GW fans complained about the price of models, the complexity of the models? Increasingly, they're no longer fun to build. They are so complex, and they're so detailed that painting them is getting to be just a nightmare. If you play an army with tons and tons of models, it takes you forever to paint them. Some folks like the detail. I want that detail on characters and heroes, but not the rank and file. Anyways, the point here is that people have been voicing their upsetness, right? Their disillusionment or their frustration with GW for a long time. GW just keeps plowing forward. They don't care. Why? Because they know the players will still fork over the cash. It's a company. If you don't like what they're doing, the best way to hurt them is to not give them your money. And if that happens enough, they'll start to realize this was a bad decision and they might just roll it back. But if you piss and moan about something while you purchase it from the store, they don't care what you think about it because you're still buying it. So no, they have not learned their lesson. And apparently, a lot of GW fans don't learn the lesson either. You keep feeding the beast, it will keep coming back for more. I wish they did it differently, but they probably don't. We've seen it happen before. We're going to see it again. This article, I think, is pie in the sky. So that's my rant and my 2 bits. I don't like it because I don't think you should pit player against player just to get stuff they want in their hobby. I think the price of products will do just a fine job of separating who's willing to go that little extra bit to buy something. But what do you guys think? Is the FOMO model good? Do you actually like the quote-unquote thrill of the chase? Would you prefer they did it differently? Let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for listening, and keep your dice on the table.